Bruce Springsteen. I mean, I don't understand how people are not fans of Bruce Springsteen. I really don't get it. But the truth is, we're actually not going to talk about Bruce Springsteen today because he's not Jewish. Despite the name, I know it's Dutch, and he's Italian on his mom's side, but he's not Jewish, Bruce Springsteen, no. But we are going to talk about Jewish men today, and we're going to talk about hair loss. What I want to do is present a theory, because that's ultimately what I do on my hair loss channel, is I present debatable theories that we can talk about in the comment section and just sort of talk about this, not argue, but maybe learn from each other. I think theories are good. So let's talk about some examples of men who are Jewish and either have or have not experienced hair loss. I'm going to actually talk about actors today because that way they're people we all identify with. We're just kind of go through and I'm going to kind of show you a scale, a gradient. Let's start with Jason Alexander from Seinfeld. Now his real name is actually J. Scott Greenspan. There's your Jewish name that you're looking for, because Jason Alexander is a stage name. So when we think of Jason Alexander, we think of a man who doesn't have hair on top. He was clearly balding when Seinfeld was on. That was part of his character. They talked about it in the show, and that's when we think of someone who would be bald that would be famous on a show. There you go. Jason Alexander on Seinfeld, Jewish. Let's talk about somebody else that is not so bald. Quite not bald at all. Paul Rudd. Paul Rudd, Jewish actor. And his hairline, somebody was asking me earlier this week, what's an example of a perfect hairline for a guy? If you ask me, Paul Rudd, I mean, Paul Rudd's 47 years old. He's got, it goes up. If you're really being picky, you can see. My point is, it's not a juvenile hairline. It looks natural, looks good. Paul Rudd. Who doesn't like Paul Rudd? Good looking guy. And he's Jewish and he's not bald. Okay, so now I've kind of countered things. Let's talk about David Schwimmer. We've talked about him a handful of times in the last couple of weeks. Here's a man who's at age 50 still has a juvenile hairline. I mean, it's unnatural how juvenile his hairline is. And he's 50 years old and he's Jewish. David Schwimmer, who played Ross on Friends. And we can also talk about Larry David if we need another example of someone who's absolutely undeniably Jewish. The creator of Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm, all that. Larry David. And, guy with no hair on top, like Jason Alexander. So I've presented to you very briefly a handful of actors, Jewish men, some of which have lost all their hair early on in adulthood, and others that didn't. One that has a juvenile hairline, one that has a perfect hairline by my standard or whatever it is. Here's my theory. Here's where it gets, how do I say it? If you thought I was cool up to this point, you may think I'm not cool based on what I'm about to say. We've talked about here on my hair loss channel about how, in theory, European men as a whole, and this is a generalization, so prepare yourself for that, but in general, men of European descent are more likely to lose their hair at an earlier age. That's a theory that we've talked about before. Just like we've also talked about a theory that men typically, in general, men that are able to grow a good thick beard are also more likely to be the same men that experience hair loss, as if it's God's natural way of balancing things out. Oh yeah, you're going to lose your hair, but at least you could have a cool beard. Or, let's say you're of Asian descent. Might not be as easy for you to grow that full beard, but you're probably not going to lose as much of your hair as an adult. Now, are those generalizations? Absolutely they are. But to me, they hold up, and I've seen those. So here's how I want to close this video. Where do Jewish men fall in all of this? Because Jewish men are not European. Jewish men, where do they come from? I mean, Middle East, that part of the world. Yet, are Jewish men white? That's a question that's been asked before. And ultimately, I'm going to say yes. Typically, Jewish men probably have a complexion like mine. A little bit olive complexion or whatever. But they're still considered white men, right? And again, I'm not saying that Jewish men are European, but what I am saying is, it seems to line up pretty equally with the whole European theory when it comes to hair loss. That if you're a Jewish man in the likeness of a European man, you're more likely than other races in the world, more so than any other race, to go bald earlier, but also to easily naturally grow a nice thick beard. That's my theory. Please feel free to comment and let's talk more about this. I want to hear your input on this. But if we were going to place Jewish men somewhere as far as knowing, because I think we definitely can predict hair loss generally based on your ethnicity. I believe that. So if we're trying to figure out where Jewish men fall on this, I'm going to say I'm going to place them exactly in the same situation as European men. Not saying Jewish men are European. I'm not saying that. But I am saying I think they line up with that as compared to other ethnicities. Now, that's my theory that I personally invented and came up with in this video. No one's ever talked about this in the history of the world other than me that I know of. But now let's all talk about this. Let's all talk about as far as where Jewish men fall on hair loss. Because Jewish men, from what I understand, well, Jewish people make up somewhere around 2.5% of Americans. So Jewish men are a minority in America, but ultimately we're more familiar probably with Jewish people on media and in movies and in TV shows. So it's very easy to see examples, and that's how I came up with these. I was like, what are some shows that I've recently watched? Oh, who's the Jewish lead in this? Here we go. So take all that, do something with it. Let's discuss this further. I'm just presenting a theory, but I want to know what you think. I love discussing this. This is fascinating to me. I can't tell you who won the Super Bowl back in 2010, but I can tell you about hair loss theory as I help create it and we all discover it together. Thanks for watching, and thanks for hearing my theory, and hopefully thanks for leaving a comment so we can talk more about this.